His father is also here this weekend, and we have a very special treat with his bike that you can see out here on the patio. Is going to be ridden today, and it'll be the first time that it has been ridden since 2006. And we're excited to see that and hear it. It is a V5 MotoGP bike, and it is otherworldly sounding. I don't know how to explain it. When Chuck got it running that day, the whole building shook, and I knew exactly what it was, and I ran down in a very slow elevator to get downstairs as quick as possible, and I caught it, and it was just amazing. So we just can't be more thankful to Kenny and his family for parking it here and letting us tell your story. So without further ado, introduce Sean Bice here, MotoAmerica Communications, and he's going to be, talking to Kenny. So get started.
We're ready to go. Okay, I'm going to start here by showing you guys a photo that I'm going to show Kenny at the end. Remember I told you I'm going to draw from my personal experience? Well, I'm going to start with the Roberts family here and just show you guys this photo. And you probably recognize the other both people in there. If you guys can see this photo, you recognize? You don't say who the other person is, because we're going to surprise him. You guys recognize this? Okay. Kenny Roberts Jr. Well, first of all, I'm going to say that this is the photo.
Okay.
Okay, so Kenny, do you guys know the skit that Chris Farley did where he interviewed Paul McCartney, and he was like, "Hey, remember when you did that, that movie, Hard Day's Night, and that was cool." The first time I met this guy was at Loudon, New Hampshire in 1992. He and Colin Edwards both raced in that class that year, starting at Daytona. And when he came to New Hampshire, I was living in that state at the time, and Loudon was my home track. And if you guys know about Loudon, that's a tricky place to race. Not bad in a 250. But the cool thing was, a magazine that no longer exists called American Road Racing had set up this thing behind the media center. And I happened to see it. So the magazine shows it from the front. I was off to the side with my stupid little camera taking photos. And afterwards, I went up to you, Kenny, and I said, I love your father. It's the reason I love motorcycles. It's why I'm a copywriter, because of the ads that Yamaha did showing your dad. And it was like Chris Farley. I was like, hey, isn't that cool? And yeah, nothing. So anyway, Kenny, you don't remember that at all, I know.
I get that a lot, though. So
yeah, that's what I'm saying.
I believe you.
Yeah, you get that a lot. But I had to start off that way. So the incredible thing about you, Kenny, is there was that year in 92, and in 2000, 8 years later, you won a world championship, 500 race.
Yeah, not a lot of
500 series.
Not a lot of races or experience between the two either. So it wasn't like nowadays where a lot of these guys are getting, they're racing from a young age. But yeah, Loudon's, I broke my collarbone. That race was basically the only upper body injury I think I had. No
that I
wrist
didn't
or
know.
anything like that. So, yeah, 92.
Yeah.
Coming off the banking, or I was sliding a 250 and I hit the banking, and then
There was some bad. There's a couple. Do you remember turn 3?
Well, that's where. So
yeah.
Turn 1, turn 2,
yep.
Then turn 3.
Yeah.
Jimmy Felice was coming off the banking because he ran wide, and I had the thing drifting, and then it hit the banking, which is like hitting a rut on a motocross bike.
Yeah.
And that's what caused the fall. So.
Yeah, I mean, it was primarily an oval that they ended up putting a road course in.
Yeah. And then you went, because it was the first practice, so I'd only done, I don't know, a handful of laps, but you went up and then through the corners and then back over the straightaway, and it seemed fun at the time. Not when I was hurt, but yeah.
No, actually, I'm sorry now that I brought it up. That's a bad memory for you.
Yeah. I mean, it's like anything, PTSD, right? So you don't remember, you remember the good stuff.
Yeah,
You don't remember the bad stuff.
well, that was the very best stuff for me to be seeing you and Colin there. And the cool thing is, so Colin ended up winning a World Superbike Championship in the same year you won a five. Yeah,
Oh,
but
yeah.
I mean,
Same
for
year, yeah.
2000, right?
Yep.
And how much did you? I mean, what was it like in that first year in '92? Were you guys? I mean, you're obviously both on TZ 250s.
Yeah, Colin and I can talk like just without any, you know, who's better or who. And he had what he was telling me. Last year went to his place, and he probably had 100 races under his belt to my, 8, 10, somewhere in there. And they had tested and they were ready for the season. And him and his teammate, were first and second pretty much.
Yeah, Chris Deluzio, I think it was.
Exactly. Yeah. So I ran around and I never finished off the podium if I finished. And then from there to Europe, in 93. So from that point on, Colin and I talked through the years as much as you did without technology and stuff now. And like you say, it was nice to see him win championships in his level at the World Superbike the same time I was having success in the Grand Prix.
Yeah, so that year, tell us what the name of that team was that year, just so everybody knows.
For
the 250 in 92.
Oh, so that was the Team Rainey. Otsuka was the sponsorship.
Yes.
Yeah. So
I tried back in those days. You couldn't really go on the internet, but I kept trying to find out what Otsuka was. But for sure, Rainey Racing. I mean, we know who that is, right? So
yeah, Otsuka was electronics, and I think printers mainly, something like that.
Okay, yeah, it was an amazing year. And like I said, you had raced a couple years prior to that at Laguna, I think, didn't you? One-offs.
No.
Maybe
no.
1 year before that.
No, because I decided at 17, after seeing John at Sears Point, and then I did some races on a YSR 50, and then some races at Willow Springs, and then 91 I tested at Suzuka or at Laguna.
That's what
John's
it was.
bike, but I didn't know anything about RPMs, and so I flooded the bike, the spark plugs a couple times because I was like at 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 RPM.
Yeah.
I didn't know it wanted to go higher, and nobody told me that. And my dad's like, "Oh no, that's got to be up." And then I never got it there anyway because it was way too fast. And I was probably 9 years old in today's, or 11 years old in today's youth. Meaning, with my experience being 16 years old or whatever, it's really like about 11-year-old now.
Yeah. Yeah, it's incredible. Even a Roberts. I mean, that's incredible that people didn't think that you rode at a lot earlier age than you did, but
yeah,
raced, I should say. You rode for a long time.
I got to be a kid and
That's
travel
pretty
around
awesome.
and go internationally with my dad, and I only decided to do it at my pace, I guess. Which you look back and you'll say, well, I wish we could have, done it sooner or pushed more or this, but trying to change the past puts you in a wrong spot in the future, or a different spot, I should say. So it's kind of irrelevant. These kids are starting so young nowadays. I think, in my opinion, maybe too young, because there's a level you get to where you start to get burnt out without success and with injury. And our stage was, as we in our mid 30s, we were kind of like, hey, this has been enough.
Yeah.
But we didn't really get going until 15, 16, 17. Now
Right.
These kids they're on their social media, and 6 years old, they've got their following, and I don't know if the careers are going to last that long at a MotoGP level or not.
Your dad once told me that you have a good 10 years to make it happen. Did he ever tell you that?
Well, that's what I mean. So
Yeah.
Now if you're starting younger, is it going to slide that window either direction? Is it going to bring it back?
Yes.
And Marc Marquez now is, in his 30s, and he doesn't show any signs of slowing down. So, and he started, I mean, there's pictures of Valentino and him when he was real young, and him and I when he was young as well. So, maybe it just extends it at the beginning further. But It's hard to say. It's,
Well, it's an interesting perspective because that what's going on over in Europe and Spain with all these young kids doing what they're doing is really driving our younger kids, and that's what our Talent Cup is all about. I mean, they want to start young, we want to get them going, but I hope it's not too early for them.
yeah, I mean, we'll see.
Yeah.
It's just if you can keep the kids having fun, that's the main thing.
Right.
If it doesn't become like for me, it was always being competitive and it was I didn't have a lot of fun because it was it was intense. But when you win, it's fun. But the time that time is it's the 1%
Mm-hmm.
of the total, time in general. So
Yeah.
not a lot of 1% of the time.
So, like your father, I mean, you started out with Yamaha, but you won a championship with Suzuki, so you switched over to those guys. Can you tell us what went on there and how you changed to that brand?
Well, so I was when I left America, fortunately with my dad's ability, to the Spanish championship was taking off, or they had started it, and I spent a year there, and then had an arm injury, which I guess I forgot the upper body, arm injury in '94 that kept me out of the season, and then when I got back finally into the 500s in '96, then it was a Yamaha, but it was a hybrid sort of Yamaha. So we had Team Roberts. That was so a lot of people. If you want to get technical, I'm sure some people in here would like to hear.
Let's get technical.
Yeah,
Let's get technical. Sorry.
So you had Yamaha Motor Corporation, which was Norik Abe, and then you had Team Roberts Yamaha, which was Jean-Michel Bell and myself. So our bike, up until Max Biaggi in 2001, Yamaha was still buying cylinders from Team Roberts and exhaust pipes. So they never bettered the Team Roberts cylinders and exhaust pipes, even when Team Roberts wasn't with Yamaha anymore. So we were doing things like traction control in late 95 into 96, and Yamaha was going a different direction with traction control than Team Roberts. So Yamaha was going with an acceleration method with a crank. So the crank would spin up, and if it spun too fast, then it would, cut ignition or whatever. But the problem with that we saw was that the momentum's already started. So by the time it catches it and it realizes it's going too fast, so is the rear wheel. So we were doing it with wheel speed, front and rear wheel speed, and just cutting spark as soon as the rear wheel speed, gained a percentage more than we wanted. So I'm starting out on a 500, and these were the days that you just kind of fell down and went, that was the biggest crash I had, and why, on the 500s. And I was young, so they decided to put it wasn't quite the size of a ping pong ball, but almost, on the dash, and it was a red light. And they said, okay, if this comes on, then the traction control is not working. Go out and try it. So that we put a slick front and a rain tire rear, and I'm at Jerez, which is like Loudon. You would rather be at like Barcelona or, a track that's got long flowing corners, not just, moguls. And the joke was they were going to say, well, what happened? Because I'm in the hospital. And I said, I don't know. I just saw a red light.
Oh.
What am I going to say,
Wow.
right? Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
But anyway, that didn't happen, but that was what I said was going to happen.
Yeah.
It performed well, and then so 96, there was the sort of the inner rival with Yamaha and then Team Roberts with Jean-Michel, myself, and Norik. And he won a race, Suzuka, that year. And then after that, halfway through the year, Philip Morris was asking Team Roberts, you're supplying Yamaha with most of the stuff. Why are we doing this? And with the financial backing of Philip Morris, the decision was made by my dad and some of the other guys in the team to just build their own bike. And that's where the Modinas comes in, then 97, 98. As we fast forward, they decided to go with a 3-cylinder, and it never achieved what the theoretical numbers showed it could do with less weight and stuff. My dad had raced the Honda V3 against Freddie at tracks where Freddie picked the V3 over the V4. So the concept was sound, but the state of the 500s at that time were just too fast for the V3 to have success. And we had gotten about halfway through the season in '98 with the Modinas, and we came to a crossroads where we had a designer that designed Mick Doohan's Honda, the Big Bang, designed a new V3 running the opposite direction with the crankshaft and some things, and we were going to try it at the Czech Republic. That was '98, and the decision was, if I'm not a second faster out of the box, then I'm going to probably sign with Suzuki, because if we're slower, we're already at the back of the field. So you can't develop something that takes a year and bring it to the racetrack, and then if it's not immediately better, to hope that, oh well, we can get it to this one, which is already not competitive.
So did they court you? Or did you have an offer from them, Suzuki?
Gary Taylor and I had spoken. Warren Willing at the time too was also leaving to go to Suzuki. I don't know if I knew that he was, but I knew that something was happening or he was leaving. I didn't know where. And Warren wasn't my crew chief at the time, but so he was going there, and then I tested the bike on Monday, and it was a second or so off. So it's like, okay, I'm going with Suzuki through Gary Taylor, and then Warren happened to be there. And I mean, I worked with Warren, and he built the V3 for my dad, so it wasn't like we hadn't worked together. But at that point on, we were crew chief and rider for Suzuki.
So the V3, most of you probably know, the V3 was a two-stroke. This bike out here is a four-stroke. Now, your dad probably more than once famously used to call four-strokes diesels, right? And then you guys ended up with a four-stroke. What was that like?
Well, the transition to the four strokes initially wasn't anything. They were just faster. They weren't anything like this initially. The Yamaha, the Suzuki, the Ducati, yes, and the Honda, yes, but the others were mainly like quiet street bikes. So what you'll see today and what they are now is vastly different than what the four strokes used to be, which are just street bikes with the mirrors taken off, with back in the day. Mm-hmm. But these are full, this is exotic stuff, is what I would call it now.
Yeah. So this is an interesting part of it. You think about, well, again, I'm going to defer to your dad. You're okay with that, right?
What's that?
If I mention some stuff about your dad.
Oh, yeah.
So obviously most of Kenny Roberts' career was with Yamaha, and then you have Kenny who won in 2000 on a Suzuki, and it's kind of like Honda was always like those other guys. You don't go anywhere near that. That's Freddie Spencer and all that stuff going on, and all of a sudden there's a Honda engine in a bike that Team Roberts created. How did that happen that even Honda, you guys even got it together with Honda?
I'm sure that Chuck Axlin and my dad, probably Chuck, maybe you'd have to ask him, probably instigated it earlier and got the stuff happening. So Suzuki and I split ways. I forecasted sort of what was going to happen. Suzuki at the time basically competes. They don't dominate. HRC is a Honda Racing Corporation is all about the motor in the past, and they take pride of the speed charts and of the engine itself. Ducati, as you see dominating now, they're there to make a statement. Suzuki at the time when I rode, we were just competing, and it was, how could we compete for less money, was basically the motto. Now that wasn't advertised, but you quickly figured out that was through many different ways that you could look at how we were competing. So that's frustrating as a rider, because you have Suzuki saying, if we build you a motorcycle similar to Valentino's, then we know you can win. So they give you good contracts and you're treated well, but the bike's not very competitive. So then the press just blames the rider, and then that wears after a while, and then they'll come to you and say, well, your teammates in ninth. And I'm like, yeah, but let me worry about being first or second, not ninth or 15th.
Right.
And so that's, you can just see, you watch this year with, the world champion on an Aprilia, and you'll see how big a difference a bike can make. Look at Marquez now. I mean, he was anywhere from 5 seconds to 25 seconds faster than any GP23 last year finishing the races. And he's riding at 80% now, winning races. So when Suzuki came to me, they're like, you can't ride anymore. I'm like, yeah, I figured that was coming. And then we went with Honda and my dad's team, and we ended up keeping Suzuki off the podium 2 or 3, maybe even 4 races that year. So they still hadn't achieved a podium with John Hopkins, and we were the ones blocking them from that with the Honda engine stuffed in that chassis, that bike. Yeah.
Just real quick, back to the Suzuki for a minute. I want to, because as I understand it, so Kevin Schwantz won the championship in 1993 on an RGV 500. Kenny won in 2000 on an RG 500. I've been told that there were some parts in your bike that were from Kevin's bike. Is that possible?
Yeah, surprisingly it was, because I was with, at a young age, before I even decided to ride or wanting to ride, I was 13, 14, 15, going to races and seeing, I was there when Team Roberts won races with Wayne Rainey, who had a factory, they were sponsored by Dunlop. It's the best tires in the world for Dunlop at the time, with a Michelin front tire bought at the bike store down the road, because Dunlop couldn't make a front tire as good as the standard Michelin. So he won Grand Prix, beat McDoohan and Kevin Schwantz on Michelin stock tires from the store and the Dunlop rear. So we had seen a lot of different things happening. So I was immune to, drilling holes in chassis, welding, gussets in to stiffen things up. This was all kind of stuff that was normal. Now you would never, but back then it wasn't out of the ordinary. So when I first got on the Suzuki, I was immediately quick, because the V3, you had to have a lot of corner speed to make up for the horsepower difference. So then you could relax and ride it more like a 500 and square the corners off and relax at the apex to slow it down to get the horsepower to the ground. We initially tested it, and the chassis was too stiff torsionally, and what that does is it creates a chatter that the rider can't feel, but the data can pick it up sometimes. So we loosened up the chassis a little bit the first test, and I think we ended up quickest, but we had tested a 45 degree, 60 degree, 90, and 120 degree crank. Wow. I think we were going to go with 90 at Jerez at the time, and Suzuki said, hey, do you want to try a 180 degree crank at Australia? And this was November, and Australia was in January. And this would have been 98 of November, and that would have been 99 of January. So I'm like, oh, okay, yeah. So they show up with it, and Taka, the engine guy, takes it out of his carry-on, and it's in a bag of oil. And I'm like, wow, how did you guys make it so fast? And he goes, no, this is Kevin's 91 crank. I'm like, so at that point I realized, if we don't win, I'm in trouble, because there's no way Wayne's crank from 91 fits in the 93 bike, let alone the 2000. It's different crankcases.
Yes.
So that's when I kind of went, okay, well, I guess what I have is what we have. And that's
crazy.
That's what it is. So I tried it, and there was no wind, and we went fast, but there's no bottom end. So they took it out, and they saved it for later, I guess. I don't know.
That's incredible.
And then halfway through the 99 season, Team Roberts has they have a technology site at the time, and we formed a union with a contract and had them helping us design exhaust pipes and cylinders for the Suzuki, because the Suzuki I won on in 99 and 2000 had, at 10,000 horsepower, had 15, or at 10,000 RPM had about 12 to 15 horsepower less than the Yamaha. Wow. So they were supposed to, work with Team Roberts and give them cylinders and pipes so that we could help, but they were always a version or two less than Suzuki should have been giving them. And they drug their feet on the contract and stuff. So by the time we really needed the parts, to try to defend the championship in 2001, we were still on the 99 spec stuff, really.
Wow.
So we didn't, because Team Roberts would find a horsepower on a cylinder. So at one cylinder at 45 horsepower, they'd find, get it to 46, and Suzuki be like, yeah, we got the same. Well, but you got to give us the 46 one so that we can get 47.
Yeah.
You can't give us the one that you've already improved on as well.
That's right. That doesn't make sense.
No.
It's not even common sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or it is
Wait, you're into
common sense.
politics?
No,
Oh,
I'm just
okay.
saying it's.
I thought you were talking about the last 4 years.
Oh no, I'm just
okay.
saying, yeah, common sense for sure.
yeah,
It's like
no.
sometimes that doesn't come
You don't
into
have to
play.
explain common sense to me.
All right, well, let's move off for that for a second. So I want to mention something about Team Roberts during those days. The shop was located, I say shop, it was quite an operation. It was in Banbury in England, and they were in the absolute heart of Formula One engineering. So they were right up to speed on all that stuff and were able to do so much prototyping. Kenny talked about the different variations of the V3. And then they come along with this, and as I understand it, Carmelo Espeleta, Dorna, actually approached your dad or Chuck or somebody about trying to put a Honda in that chassis. So anyway, they did it. And I have a question for you about this. That KR211V that's out here that you're going to ride pretty soon. Okay. During that time period, and I think it's still the case, the manufacturers would actually build motorcycles to fit certain riders. And Honda built a bike for Danny Pedrosa, but not for Nicky Hayden. So Nicky had to get the thinnest I'd ever seen him ever get in his life to try to fit on that bike. Was this KR211V, you were the rider? Did they build it to your specification for your size as a rider?
Well, if you're going to make a statement like that, go even further and
Okay.
blame Dorna.
Well, yeah, okay.
I mean, Dorna is Danny Pedrosa, right?
Spanish?
So Dorna needs Danny to be champion. They're sponsored by Repsol. Nicky's world champion, and the bike shows up to fit Danny. So, I mean, just keep going. Just put the tinfoil hat on and keep digging. And yeah, I felt the same way for Nicky. Like when the thing showed up, I'm like that. It was too big or too small for Nicky. And it was the worst engine I've ever, I mean, it was worse than some of the Suzuki stuff I rode that, they had made mistakes on. It was restricted. There was no airflow. It was slow. The connection was bad. Coming off of that engine, which was the best engine, that engine still right now is equal to anything out there. Wow. I mean, you just up the horsepower, but how linear that bike is and the simplicity of it is unmatched.
Yeah. So that's the 211V Honda engine. You're talking about the 212, I guess, is the next year. They made a mistake on the engine after this one.
That engine, the 211, we had some problems with that bike, which you could go into detail about, but essentially we were running 20% power reduction in all gears, first three anyway. And the most advanced engine cut for, it wasn't wheelie, it was traction control, essentially. So we had a rain setting power reduction and the highest form of traction control. HRC wouldn't use that traction control because it made the bike pop and miss and stuff, which they could relate to the engine having a problem, meaning the fans. So they didn't want to hear that with HRC, so they didn't run the setting we were running. But we had problems with the chassis that we didn't understand with inputs into the software that gives you the ability to change geometries and suspension force on a computer to then put it on the bike because it's where you want the bike to be positionally. So with the reduction of the power and the traction control, that effectively was an 800. So then they came with an 800 that didn't run like an 800. Mm-hmm. Ducati had the first test in Motegi, and I was on that. And Sette came by me on a Ducati that I thought was 1,000, but way faster than normal. And we were talking on pit lane or on the pit wall, and he's like, "How'd you like that bike?" I'm like, "What was that?" And he's like, "That was the 800." I'm like, "Impossible." He goes, "No, it's revving to 22,000 RPM."
Oh my
as well.
gosh.
And he says that the problem is that it'll rev there all day, but they can't finish the race because it'll just drain the fuel.
Yeah.
So their 800 was faster than the 1,000
Wow.
in that test, which was 3 or 4 races left of the year.
What's the rev limit on this bike?
Well, Nikki's was 18 plus, and ours was below 16.8-ish.
Okay.
And I only know that because they gave us Nikki's RPM range by accident at the last race of the year. So,
wow.
yeah.
So one thing about that engine, you guys, it's a KR211V, but it's a Honda engine. So Honda had an RC211V. This is, as I understand it, this is the only V5 Honda engine outside of anything that Honda might still have. And I think this is the only KR211V motorcycle in complete what it is in the world.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's nothing like it.
Nothing like it. So the display that's here, your dad's YZR 500 is here. Your 2000 RGV 500 is here. Kenny's bike is so small.
No,
Your RGV is a little bigger. This is bigger than that, isn't it?
And it's slow. His bike is so slow.
It wasn't at one time.
Yeah, that's why they could wear leathers with no pads, because you can't fall down going that slow.
Have you told your dad that bike is slow?
Brian, how much horsepower does that have? We know my dad's isn't it 140 or 120? Yeah, it's like second gear. No, you get on the old bikes and it's like I remember it being a lot faster.
Yeah. I'm
not saying it wasn't it didn't stop either.
Right.
So you combine it being slow, but don't give it brakes, it's fast. Right?
Hey, corner speed, baby.
I don't know. They're dragging their elbow for corner speed now. That was duct tape still.
But this bike is physically bigger than the RGV you rode.
Yeah. I mean, it's the stuff now, like the integration of the engine to basically, to be the chassis is where everybody's going.
Yeah.
Right? So when you look at the Ducati, even the bikes here, they're just magnificent from the fact of its engine with a couple subframe things doing whatever they go off and do. So
yeah.
It's not bigger from the standpoint of needing to be that big to create horsepower, if that makes sense. I think they have an abundance of horsepower. They could shrink the motors if they needed to, but price, technology, what they're trying. If Ducati had to shrink the overall bike by a certain amount of millimeter, does that make it faster on the racetrack?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think they're at that was never at the necessity to have it smaller physically for the price of money versus the lap time effect, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I want to touch on one thing real quick. My new best friend over there, Zeke, sitting by my new best friend, Bice, over there. Hey, so Zeke, I want to talk about the fact that the bikes that are in this museum, I mean, if you guys are like me, you have motorcycles in your garage that you don't ride every day. I have 7 of them. And I'm like, I think they're in a permanent form of stasis. I just get on them and go. Well, you can't do that. And this KR211V, they had to prep it at this museum, and it just shows what this museum can do in their shop. And Zeke is part of that whole thing. There were some things that you had to do to get this bike ready. I mean, even I think it has special spark plugs on it. Maybe Kenny, you can talk about it, or? Okay.
Yeah, I think Chuck should talk about it.
Okay.
Come on, Chuck. They can't hear you.
Listen, Chuck, I'm going to bring the mic to you. This is great. Oh, by the way, there's a video of Chuck riding that bike out there, and he was ripping it around the tracks. So.
It's a fun bike to ride.
Yeah, I bet it is.
Really powerful. The spark plugs are really strange. The threads on them are about 2 inches long, and I've never seen anything like that. So we were very careful about not dropping them or damaging them. But as far as getting it running, it was really no problem. We put fuel in it and a battery and, checked it a little bit, and it cranked right up. So it was good.
Did they have those plugs? They're not off? They're clearly not off the shelf plugs.
No, I don't have any spares. Maybe you know more about
O'Reilly's just down the road.
Yeah, right.
There's 2 shops in town.
Gotcha.
Just like that Michelin front tire, right?
My Toyota pickup truck, I put some in. It runs a little hot with them. But.
So I don't really know a whole lot about that engine yet. I'm learning, so we're getting there.
Except that you had to prep it just like you do with all these bikes to get them going. I mean, they're not always pristine when you get them, right? I mean, they look good from the outside, but sometimes you have to do some stuff to them.
You do.
Yeah.
But that one was pretty much ready to go.
Wow.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you, Chuck. That's awesome. Okay, I got to talk to you about Warren Willing a little bit because you knew him for a really long time. So I heard sometimes the technicians or the guys on the team, and you alluded to this earlier, think, well, okay, it's the rider, it's not us. We've got the most amazing bike ever came along. And the KR211V, I think it happened before that one time. But let's talk about, I think there are some adjustments that had to be made to that bike. Can you tell us that story?
It's funny, you know, you watch Formula One and you watch MotoGP, and there's not references much made to the cars as much as it is always the bikes. Like it's always the rider initially, and in Formula One, it's like, yeah, that car's it's a half second slow. They just have a way. The whole perception of everything is different. So if somebody's going slow, oh, the rider's, you know, doesn't know. It's never really the bike. Maybe it's just because the bikes are so much more complex, you know, with lean angles and stuff like that, and the rider is much more part of the lap time, but less and less now. But anyway, so you want to know the 2006 start? Is that what you?
Yes, I do.
To the Forza show?
Because there are two of them, but since we're talking about that bike, let's do the 2006 story.
So, well, when we first, I think, I'm trying to think of the Formula One guy's name, that John Bernard had some of his stuff for that chassis was still implemented, and he was a Formula One designer, and they had quite a bit of issues with, he wanted everything small, and he came up with some good, some bad pivot designs, and you know, you have to be able to change the pivot height and everything, and that was weak. The steering head was weak, and so Team Roberts had, you know, beefed things up after he left, and so we're still talking, you know, 2004, 2005 iterations of when I get on at 2006, and then with the Honda motor, every time there was a problem, Honda's like, you have a problem. Meaning if it doesn't start. And I'm like, that's weird because there's fuel and then it starts. But if it wouldn't start, they're like, you have a problem. And I'm going, okay, the team has a problem. How would we have a problem? Well, the gas tank had stuff in the petcock that, you know, the inside membrane was eating itself. And so it plugged the fuel, and Honda's like, yeah, we told you have a problem.
You have a problem.
Any other company would have, oh, it's not starting. Let's check the spark plugs. No, Honda's like, you have a problem. And that happened like 3 or 4 times. And I'm like, well, how do we, okay, so now the gas tank's fixed. And it's like, so now how do we have a problem? You know, and then, oh, the chassis ground fell off, or, you know, who knows? But that was interesting, you know. And the preseason went on and we were fast, you know, but the thing wasn't, I didn't have a teammate, which it didn't really matter, but it wasn't anything that was better than anything out there at the time. But it was rideable, and at certain tracks we were fast, and you only have 3 or 4 tests. And we get to China, and then it just was unrideable. I don't even remember. I just know it wouldn't change directions. Luckily, it didn't steer either, and then I couldn't get the throttle on to help all that other stuff. And then it had chatter. So Warren was like all angry, throwing his crap around the garage, and like, it's been good all session, all preseason, or promising, but now it's horrible. I'm like, dude, I don't know. So he's pouting, and then Chuck's at the back of the garage, and the Honda guy in charge of HRC at the time comes up to Chuck, and he's like, how's it going? And he's like, oh, good. Warren's ready to quit. The rider's, you know, ready to quit. But other than that, everything's good. So I didn't say anything, but Chuck just was, you know, joking with the guy, and he's like, your rider is a world champion, yes? And Chuck's like, yeah. Well, it's not the rider. So Chuck,
they said that.
Yeah, you can ask Chuck the story.
There you go. It's
So-
not the rider.
Well, so anyway, Chuck says, hey, if we get you the, you know, design, the chassis, can you guys take a look at it and see if there's anything that we're missing. The guys that designed the bike, the HRC, the 2006 bike, were there on holiday. The two chassis designers. So they got the designs that night and looked at it, and they said that the front steering head was 15 millimeter too high, which is a lot. I mean, we're adjusting 0.5 millimeter stuff.
Wow.
So we were able to make some inserts to bring the whole front of the chassis down, and through the season you don't have a lot of time as you think you would through races, but something was happening that Warren caught 3 or 4 races in the middle of the season that he was frustrated with, that he couldn't figure out. When we'd make a suspension change for the rear, it wasn't using the force that it was supposed to use in the simulation. Then they figured out that the base number or the 0 number that they started with was completely wrong, which put the axle an inch off, which is a tremendous amount of, and Warren had been making swing arm adjustments and pivots and rear linkages, new linkages based off of a wrong number. Wow. And they couldn't, we didn't have a lot of, you probably could have caught up with 20 guys at a factory looking at numbers, and Warren was the only one that knew something was wrong. So it took him a minute to figure out where the problem stemmed from, and it was inputs that caused, that we ran that the whole season, except for the last 3 or 4 races. And then once we fixed that, then the changes started to end up making sense when we would change spring rates or linkages to put the tire in the geometry we wanted it needed to be. That started working, but we've only got 25% of the races left.
Yeah.
So there's a lot. I mean, there's a lot of things that go on behind the scenes.
Yeah. There's one thing I want to talk about. I'm going to stand up for a minute just so I can look at the bike while I'm saying this. So you guys know in motorsports how important it is to the livery on the bike, the brands that are on the bike. It helps pay for the motorcycle. Kenny, I don't know if you know this, but I have actually used Venture Petroleum in my motorcycles, and I love Phantom Energy drink. That stuff's better than Monster. Do they still make that?
I ride the bike. I didn't want to know any of that.
Well, you know this was for a movie, right?
I rode the bike. A lot of this stuff that you get into international stuff, and you get a lot of weird. Everybody's got contracts, and everybody's supposed to do this, but when stuff goes sideways, a lot of that stuff doesn't mean what it is supposed to mean. Yeah,
I mean, let me just tell you guys this. As I understand it, and you can help me, those 2 brands are not even real. Those were actually created for a movie or some kind of documentary that was supposed to be done. There was never Phantom. It's a great name because it was a Phantom product. And, Venture, I don't think was a gas company or a petroleum company, but those brands were on there for a reason. It was supposed to be some kind of movie. Is that correct?
That's a Chuck excellent question. I mean,
okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of things are coming and going, and yeah, my leathers just get made to my size, and it's like, this is new. Yeah.
Okay, I can never stump you, and I wasn't really trying to do it there.
We were going into the 2007 season with a 20% reduction in power and traction control. That Honda says your rider is smoother on the throttle than any of our guys, but with 3 times the amount of wheel spin. You still have problems with the bike, traction specifically. So my thing was preparing to be on podiums and to fight for a world championship on that bike with an 800cc motor, with the understanding that Ducati just has a motor that's already as fast as 1,000. We're going to kill these guys with a decent chassis and being able to outride them with that, with the power reduction, and then it comes out and it's just all crap. So, I wasn't thinking of sponsors, or I was thinking of, beating the guys I was racing.
Right.
On equipment that's similar. So when the 2000 season came, the first test is like, it's not even a chance.
Right. Right.
3
Oh,
seconds, 4 seconds a lap slower.
yeah. Okay, we're running out of time. I'm going to wrap up with one thing. I want to talk about the museum and this whole the Roberts collection, the World Champions display. So, is his dad's YZR? His dad's slow, can't stop. YZR 500 is up there.
Really slow.
Really slow. And I'm never going to say that to Senior, no doubt. And Kenny's RGV 500 and now the KR211V. That's the tip of the iceberg. The Roberts collection is here now, and it's a lot of stuff. I mean, we all have stuff, right? My dad would always go, you got to have stuff, right? Well, you have to have stuff until you get later in life, and you go like, what am I going to do with my stuff? And now people are going to be able to see what Junior had during his career and what Kenny had during his career. It's going to be not locked away like that the end of that Raiders of the Lost Ark when they put the Ark of the Covenant in the back of that warehouse. This is going to be seen by people. Not only that, but as I understand it, and maybe this is breaking news, I don't know. Kenny's from California, but I don't know. He likes the South, the Southeast. He might be coming here.
Southern hospitality draws you in, right?
Is that what's going to happen?
Seems like it. So it's a thing. It's a real thing, and we've been West Coast, I think, long enough. So yeah, we'll be back here, and I think none of us would be in the room without Mr. Barber.
Yes.
Obviously, I mean, this is the Augusta National of, motorcycle racetrack. I mean, the museum, everything.
Everything.
It encompasses. He's put Ryan Case in charge. See if we can get him to turn red. And without him, with Matthew Miles and the the board being positive with everything we're trying to do for the future, or would like to see racing and our world championship display up there. I think it's all positive stuff, but again, without these guys and the support, none of it would be happening. And it's all stuff that's never been done before. I mean, Wayne Rainey, I know Kevin, and Loris Caparossi, some of the other guys, we just hide our stuff in safes and safety deposit boxes, and nobody ever sees it. So this is the future, and there's not a better place in the world for sure, certainly in America, that can display with the way they do it, the professionalism and the support we have is quite. When my dad and I first were talking with Barber, and Brian proposed the ideas and everything, it was the first time my dad was sort of emotional, in the sense that it was something that he never thought would happen in his lifetime, that people would want to do what Barber has done with our bikes and with our story. So he was, he was taken by surprise for sure. And you're programmed to thank sponsors and to do things as you do interviews daily and time after time, but very rarely is the sincerity of the situation to where you'd go, let's just go out that way because the bikes are there, the Southern hospitality is nice. You come here and you see this, and it's like, why wouldn't you want to be near places like this? So, we could justify anything east of Texas to say, yeah, this makes sense. And
yeah. So go Barber and roll Tide, I guess.
There
for
you
you,
go.
right?
Oh, that's right. Well, we spoiled ourselves. We went last year I had never been to a college football game, and we went to Alabama versus Georgia.
Oh, man.
And everybody's like, that's it, right? Like
Yes.
You went to, Trump was there and Secret Service, and then the game was amazing. If you know what game I'm talking about, and they got a big lead, and then Georgia came back, and then they scored the game-winning touchdown. It was crazy. 200,000 people there. And they're like, yeah, so you'll never go to another college game again like that.
That's
So
amazing. You did it right. You gonna pop some wheelies on this thing out there?
I don't even know which way to go.
Well, once you figure it out, pop some wheelies,
That
all right?
way. I keep watching these guys going, okay, that looks like I should probably be in second.
All right. Thank you so much, Kenny
Yeah,
Roberts
thank
Jr.
you.
You're awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys. No. Thank you, Brian. Yes, I did forget a thing. Brian, thank you for having my back on that. I don't know if I alluded to this, but the yellow and the eagle and the yellow and black, it's not just a Yamaha thing, it's actually a Team Roberts thing. And Kenny's helmet, I believe, is going to have the eagle on the side of it when you're out there, right? Is that the helmet you're wearing?
Yeah, just my replica. Yeah.
Right, but I mean,
Yeah.
it's the eagle, it's
Yep.
the Roberts signature. Yeah, so that's iconic. So the Talent Cup that we have going now, which Kenny alluded to, these riders who start at a young age, they're back in our paddock. Kenny and Kenny Jr. are going to be at all our rounds, and everybody's delighted about it, and I couldn't be more delighted about the whole thing. It's fantastic. And Cody Kopp is the rider on their bike, a flat tracker, so he's got that background that Kenny had as being a two-time Grand National champion and one of 5 Grand Slam winners. So Team Roberts being involved in U.S. racing is very exciting. You're happy about it, right?
Oh, it's comedy. Like, I get to see somebody else getting all this fun stuff. Like, hey, try this, try that. Like, oh, I remember all that stuff. Yeah, it's going to be fun.
They're going to probably blame that rider because that rider's pretty big.
Oh, and he's just learning. But
Yeah.
But hearing my dad talk about the stuff, it's just nothing changes, and it's all great stuff. But he's the youngest, 70+ person that I know, and
Yes.
it's interesting to watch. So
Yeah, sure is.
It's a fun time.
Yeah, it's awesome. Okay, thank you.
Well,
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you, guys.
Kenny, I think everybody here would really enjoy you telling the story that you told me about, I think it was 05 or 06 at Laguna, when you were having...
So that bike at Laguna going over turn 1, yeah, so what you can do on that bike that I figured out you could do, I don't know if too many other guys would do it, maybe 3 or 4, not Valentino, but Marquez for sure. You could go first, second, third, fourth, and just as you go under the bridge, you're leaned over like sort of this corner here. And I figured out I could slam it on its side and then it would immediately take off, which is fine because you can just keep it there on that bike. If you wanted a golf ball either way, you just articulate the throttle. But as soon as it went sideways, then I would aim for the inside of the pit lane. There's these little beacon things. And I didn't want to hit them, but I needed to go towards them. And then as the crest came up, then I would lift the bike up. The track would keep going left, but I would go to the right, off the ground. Then the bike would come back down straight. Then I could lean it over again, and it would drift because I still need to go left. And it would drift, and then I could just sit up and brake down 3 gears into the first turn. And Honda was very concerned because it was lifting off the ground. And they're like, we don't know what that does to the oil pump. And if it's not getting oil, so please don't jump. I will not jump, which I didn't listen to at all.
Of course.
Yeah. And I was running some other traction control stuff for the problems with the bike that they ended up giving a Nicky the next day, and we switched lap times, and he won the race. But we had a competitive package. But yeah, that was the best. That stuff, those laps that I could do that with were unforgettable. I mean, you never jump a MotoGP bike over Laguna Seca turn 1.
Right.
My dad's bike would like barely wheelie over it.
Oh, too slow and can't stop.
And like he had to clutch it and pull up on it.
Okay, one quick question, Brian, related to that. Hey, Kenny, so 2006, Nicky won the championship. You podiumed twice with this bike. Did you guys actually help Nicky win the championship?
We helped him with.
Yeah.
Valentino and I were helping Michelin with the Spear some Michelin and some other stuff. But then on the Honda side, Nicky was struggling at some of the things. They could kind of rely on me to help him with some of the gearing stuff or whatnot. And, and I was happy to help him with that. And I didn't want to see him struggle and lose it off of technical things. And, he's world champion and he rode good enough to win it. But I think there was some internal things going on there. So I was kind of like his teammate, if you will.
Wow. There's something you don't think about. You're a champion and you made helped make another champion.
Well, I mean, I did, Nicky deserved, I mean, he rode the bike.
Yeah.
But, when you got some inner team rivalry stuff happening and then, Danny ran into him and put him in a bad spot. And so he didn't deserve some of the things he was, having stress to win the championship on the last few races. So we were there to, hey, don't run that tire. That's I put 20 on this tire and it's a 10th off, but you'll be those type of things to help him. He could come to me and know that I wasn't going to give him any BS.
Yeah, that's so amazing. That's a great story, you guys. I've never heard that one before. Thank you, Kenny.
I can make stuff up too.
No, I believe everything you tell me, so don't make it up because I'm going to believe you. Thanks, you guys. All right.